Thorpe is there to take the candy.
What's going on, everybody? It's another episode of 4th and 15 with Mel and Smooth. As always, I'm Mel, and joining me as always is my co-host, Ronnie Big Smooth Hennigan. Ronnie, what's happening, bro?
Mel, what's going on, man? Definitely glad to be here and want to thank y'all again for tuning in to our show.
Man. Crazy weekend. But first, let's touch on a lighter subject. Tragedy happened over this past week. George Atkinson III passed away at the age of 27. He apparently had been dealing with depression. He lost his twin brother, Josh, the year before, and his mom back in 2018. As I have been researching, no cause of death has been disclosed yet, but we wish to send our condolences out to George Atkinson, NFL Hall of Famer, as well as the rest of the Atkinson family, because we know how hard that is to deal with, and no one likes to lose a child or a loved one at any point. So we express our condolences once again to the Atkinson family and hope they get through this one with the help of God.
Absolutely. And just to let y'all know, when it comes to someone's mental health, definitely do not take that lightly. Don't look at them as being soft. Don't look at them as being crazy or, tell them to kind of suck it up, because everybody deals with stuff differently. But, the people that are laughing the most, the people that are joking the most, the ones that seem like they're fine, you want to check up on them, man, because that could be more of a safety net or something to kind of get them away from all of that. But, ditto, my words are the same as Mel. I do, want to extend my condolences to the Atkinson family and hope they can get through this, man.
Exactly. And it's really no joke, And if you know somebody who's feeling that way or dealing with depression, check up on them, make sure they're okay, because that's not something to joke about or take lightly. And, just make sure that your loved ones are okay when in that situation, because you never want to see anything happen when you could have, helped prevent it.
Absolutely.
All right. Now that we have, a lot to talk about this weekend, we're going to start off in the NFL. And I wanted to stick with the AFC North for just this topic. Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland all win. Unfortunately, Cincinnati had to play Cleveland. We all know how that turned out. But with Pittsburgh winning, Baltimore clinching a playoff berth, and Cleveland getting the win over Cincinnati, it keeps Cleveland in the hunt for that last wild card spot. But my question to you, Ronnie, is what do you see playing out with the last four games for the AFC North? Does Pittsburgh make it? Does Cleveland make it? We already know Baltimore's in with the win over Buffalo today, but the second and third spots, I think, are going to be very important as far as the last wild card spot is concerned.
Right.
So what do you see happening with these last four games?
Well, with regards to the AFC North, I actually see that momentum that Pittsburgh is taking, and I see them getting that win next week over Buffalo. That's going to be a hard game for them. It won't be a game that'll be as easy to win, because that defense still is playing really good on Buffalo's end as well. But, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, how we felt that, Duck Hodges was definitely the better quarterback to go to on top of Mason Rudolph. And
it shows.
Man, it just shows a lot. Like, when they were going with Rudolph, I felt like they felt obligated, because, they drafted him and they didn't know much about Duck and him being an undrafted rookie. And they were like, well, he's the one that we felt was the best option at the time, And I'm thinking to myself, like, man, I don't see it. I don't see what y'all seeing. But overall, I just feel like, Pittsburgh will get that win next week against Buffalo. With them both having the last two spots there in the wild card, It's going to be a huge win for them to get that. And then for Buffalo to fall, that kind of puts everybody else still up there. So you have Tennessee that's in the hunt still as well. The Colts are in discussion. And a lot of these teams all have the same record right now between, Tennessee, you have Cleveland, you got Indianapolis, and, they're only a couple of games behind both Pittsburgh and Buffalo after next week. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out the rest of the season. With Cleveland, I just don't see Cincinnati beating them this season. They definitely, came close, but a lot of that has to do with, once again, the offense kind of trying to figure things out still, even this late in the season, which is crazy to me. But I just don't feel like they have enough manpower to get past Cleveland for the win. And then there's the Cardinals you have coming up too. With the Cardinals, it's kind of hard to see what team you're going to play. They're not consistent week to week. There's some weeks where they play you really tough, and there's other weeks where they kind of just back off and you're not sure what you're going to get. Like today's game against Pittsburgh was a really, really good game to check out. They didn't end up getting the win, but they did play them very tough, and you kind of see where that comes from as far as the coaching staff and also them having Kyler Murray and trying to figure things out. And then for the Baltimore game, the way Baltimore's been playing since that loss to Cleveland, I just don't see it happening. I don't see Cleveland all of a sudden having this same little epiphany and waking up and busting 40 points again. I just don't see that happening against Baltimore. If anything, I feel like maybe the score is a little bit closer if for some reason they figure out the offense. But other than that, I just don't see them getting anything happening against them with the way that Baltimore is playing right now. And they clearly are focused. They said, hey, we just clinched the playoffs. Okay, cool. They're like, well, we're not going to really celebrate that because their goal is Super Bowl or bust this year. And I can definitely see them getting back to that. So, shout out to them and how they're playing. They definitely, are going to be probably that team that will represent the AFC North, obviously. And, it'll be exciting to see what they do later on down the road. But I just feel like Baltimore definitely, like you said, is a lock. And as far as anybody else, it's kind of a toss-up, man. I think Cleveland has a chance, but I feel like Pittsburgh may end up getting that last spot. And once they do that, it just doesn't look that much easier for their role going forward because they may end up facing Baltimore again in the playoffs. So that's another issue. But, that's how I feel like it's going to go. It's kind of like a toss-up, but I feel like, Pittsburgh definitely has more of an opportunity right now just based off of their wins and losses. But as far as Cincinnati, I don't see them beating Cleveland again this season at all. So you're looking at two sweeps back-to-back for the first time.
You're right. And it is Cincinnati, and they are not looking good right now. Like I said a couple weeks ago, I think they're tanking because Dalton's out almost but certainly gone after this season, depending on what they decide to do. But I feel with the Baltimore and Pittsburgh situation, okay, they split with Baltimore. Mm-hmm. And I thought that second Pittsburgh game helped them out a lot because now you have to win out and hope to get some help.
Right.
Now, if you look at the playoff standings, they are actually, Cleveland rather, is actually 8th behind Tennessee and Baltimore. Not Tennessee, but Tennessee and Pittsburgh. So, with the Raiders losing and the Titans losing today, it helps. And I think you have to come out. You cannot come out flat against Arizona coming this weekend. And I think that because they have been playing fairly decent offensively, I don't think they know what they exactly want to do.
Yeah.
As far as what's their identity. But if they can establish the run like they did against Baltimore in that first game and control the line of scrimmage, and not only control the line of scrimmage, control the clock, I think that helps them within the next coming weeks, especially against Baltimore. Because if you looked at that New England game, yes, Baltimore did come out with the win, but in time of possession, it was almost even up until the third quarter, well, the end of the third quarter rather. And, you know, if it's one thing we know about Belichick, if he want to keep you off the field, he gonna keep you off the field.
Right.
And I think if I'm Freddie, I going into the Baltimore game work on how we gonna ball control, how we gonna keep Lamar off the field, how we gonna limit his possessions. Because I feel if you limit the possessions, you have a chance to keep the score within reach. Even if you lose that game, if you keep that score, let's say 17-14 going into the fourth, I think you got a shot.
Absolutely.
So,
I agree with that too, Mel, man. I feel like with that game coming up, like you said, they got to control line of scrimmage. That's the first thing. And then you got to, like you said, keep Lamar from having too much time with the ball. And then lastly, I mean, they got to run the dang ball, man. Like this first half of this game, I was like, I don't know what they're trying to do. You have probably the best duo when it comes to running backs in the league. You got Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. It just doesn't make any sense for you to not run the ball. It drives me nuts every time I see that. And it's like, you have to be that run first team.
Yeah, mind you, Nick Chubb is leading the NFL in rushing right now, as of today.
Man.
So for you to not have an identity established is kind of mind-boggling, because now it's like, you guys know what you got to do. You got two of them.
Right.
And something we're going to touch on later on in the show is that when you have running back by committee, why not use it? I mean, you see how hard it is to bring Chubb and Kareem Hunt down. So if you know it's going to take 2 or 3 people to bring both of your running backs down, why not throw the cannonball at them? Like, that's just a recipe for disaster against the defense, because now they don't know. Yeah, they know he's on the roster. Yeah, they know he touches the ball every now and again, but they don't know when. Right. They don't know how you're going to do it. So why not, if I'm Freddie, why not just mix it up? Throw a monkey wrench in the program. Okay, they're going to stack the box. We'll flex out Kareem. If they want to follow Kareem, that's fine. Now we got Odell and we got Jarvis sitting out there one-on-one. It's not hard. I think Freddie, truthfully, from looking at game to game, depending on who the team is, I think he's overthinking it and second guessing his play calling. And I feel like if you're going to do that, you might as well just hand it over to your offensive coordinator. Ain't that what you hired him for?
Man, tell me about that. My goodness. You know what's funny about that? The offensive coordinator, Monken, he literally said to the media, well, I guess I'm here for my weekly dentist appointment. I was on the floor with that one. So I'm thinking to myself, this man obviously is like, well, I'm only up here because I have this title and because you're asking me questions about the offense. And I guess they call me the offensive coordinator, even though I'm not really calling plays during the game. But I guess I'm in charge for running it during the practice or whatever. So here I'm asking your questions, but as far as what game plan that I have going into the weekend, I have no idea, because I'm not the one calling the plays, unfortunately. It's the head coach. So how does that work?
And can you blame him?
I'm sorry.
Can you blame him? Like, I don't understand why you hire an offensive coordinator, but you're going to keep the play calling responsibilities. And I thought, in my experience of coaching, your head coach is designated jobs for everybody, so it takes the stress off of him. If you look at these games, Freddie on the sidelines looks very stressed out.
Yep.
And I think the stress of calling the plays during the game instead of checking on how we make adjustments is hurting the team, because yes, before the season started, I gave them 6-10, but the only reason I gave them 6-10 was not because of the roster. It was because of Freddie and the position he would put himself in, overthinking things and thinking too much at times, and maybe even stressing himself out to the point where you don't know what kind of situation you got because you're not really there completely. And what I mean by there is that you're in the game, but you're not in the game.
Exactly.
Because you see, okay, Pittsburgh that definitely has a problem stopping the run. I don't care what anybody says. Yes, I'm a Steelers fan, and I even see it because Kenyon Drake, he was having his way with Steelers in the first half of this game.
Man.
So if I know the Steelers have a problem stopping the run, even with J.J. Watt and Devin Bush, I got Kareem Hunt, I got Nick Chubb. See what you can do with that. Because I can, if I'm Freddie Kitchens and I see that, I got Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb in the backfield, I'm looking at the Pittsburgh defense. I'm looking at the Baltimore defense. I dare you to stop me.
Yep.
Because if you can't stop either one of them, I'm going to have my way with you. And especially today, looking at that game, yes, it's Cincinnati. He should have literally outcoached Cincinnati's head coach. He should have outcoached that whole coaching staff by himself. But the way that he's going about it, I think he's stressing himself out and wearing himself thin. And I ultimately think this might cost him in the offseason because this was a situation that was perfectly, I think Ken Dorsey literally set this up for him to succeed.
Right.
And he didn't take advantage.
And I'm right there with you, man, because the thing is, you literally have been assembled this team where if it was any other coach with a little more experience, it's like, man, the things that they could do with these players, with the level of talent they've assembled, and you just couldn't figure out a way to do anything with it. Because like you said, he overthinks everything, top to bottom, right? You got offensive coordinator you went out and got, you don't use them. And quite frankly, he's been in this situation before. Did he not learn anything under Hugh Jackson? Are we not seeing the same thing happen again where Hugh wanted to try to call plays and have his nose all up in the offense? Like, dude, pick the people you want to see be out there, right? And just trust they can do the job. Because at the end of the day, if you can't trust that they can do the job, then it shouldn't be on the team. Quite frankly, it shouldn't be on the staff, man. It shouldn't be there at all. Like, I don't understand why you have this coaching staff where, like, okay, I know that I ran the offense last year, so I want to make sure I still am able to call plays and this and that, and my relationship with the quarterback or whatever. And it's just like, man, get rid of all that. Like, you've been put up to a different position for a reason, right? They saw something in you that obviously we're not seeing at all. And for some reason, you know, you got people behind you still trying to back you up this late in the season. And I don't know if there's like maybe some kind of clause or whatever where, you know, the Haslam's are taking a step back and they're like, well, it's the first year, let's kind of see what happens or whatever. But, you know, like you said, for Dorsey to set it up to have a team that, you know, Kitchen has to coach right now, it just doesn't make any sense what we're seeing right now. And these last games are going to tell us a whole lot about what they have and what they got going on going into next season and kind of what this offseason is going to look like. So I don't know, man. I'm really nervous about it. I feel as though, you know, if anything, they're going to probably end up breaking even if they don't make the playoffs. Be an 8-8 season, and then just kind of see what it looks like going into the offseason, man.
Yeah, and for the record, I love you, bro, but you will not use profanity on this show ever again. We will not mention Hugh Jackson and the monstrosity he created in Cleveland. Like, some of them games were hard to watch as a Steelers fan. Like, just, I felt bad. Like, I see how Duke Johnson felt now. Like, looking at him playing Texas and Houston, I see how he felt now. So, for the record, we will no longer use profanity. I don't know if the FCC listens or not, but we sorry. We will not mention Hugh Jackson ever again.
Oh, man.
And hopefully people out there listening, hopefully y'all forgive us. We sorry.
Man, speaking of Duke, did you watch that Denver and Houston game?
Yeah, I watched what I could. At some point, it just got sad, and I couldn't do it no more.
It was hard, man, because you're like, this is the same team that knocked off New England last week, right? And sparked a feeling of, hey, maybe we can get New England for the first time in a while to have a losing streak. Because looking at Kansas City, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe 2 weeks in a row we'll see this, you know what I'm saying? But when it came down to that game, I was like, wow, they are giving it to him. Like on every aspect of the ball, they are giving it to him. And then all of a sudden this week, you're like, how you play Denver and Denver pretty much like double up on the points that you score? I'm like, this is terrible. And all of a sudden they try to have this last like, surge toward the end of the game or whatever. And it's like, where was that in the first 2 quarters? Because it just looked like two totally different teams. It looked as if the records should be switched the way that both teams played today, man. It was just terrible.
Well, like I said, man, a blind squirrel can find a nut every once in a while. So, Denver, I always say if John Elway could like really sit down with his coaching staff, I think he could get it together down there. And I think it could be a big change. And Denver could give San Diego, Oakland, and Kansas City a run for their money, and that division could be competitive again because they're not in a bad position talent-wise.
Right.
Yes, they do need a solid quarterback. This backup, I don't know his name at the moment, but he's not bad, and he's looked good. But how long is that going to last? Like, just like Baker coming out of the woodwork last year, everybody who hasn't seen you is going to find, it's going to be tough to beat you. But
right.
If he starts next year, it's a whole different slate. Everybody's got film on you. Everybody knows what you can and can't do. And, how you react to that, if you improve, because looking at Baker, this is a sophomore slump. Listening to Colin Cowherd the other day, he said Baker Mayfield had more commercials than he did touchdowns. And I found it funny, but at the same time, he had a point,
Yeah.
When everybody's got film on you, you are a totally different person in the NFL, especially when week after week, your opponent, you see the same 3 opponents in your division twice.
Yep.
And then you see maybe a rotated division in its entirety once every 2 years. So they know you. And once they know you, you either improve on it or you gonna get ate alive. And right about now, Baker's looking like a sophomore who needs work. Hopefully he gets through that and finishes out the rest of the season strong, but that remains to be seen.
Right.
Now, the shootout in the Superdome, New Orleans and San Francisco. Man, when I tell you, this looked like a D2 playoff game.
Yes.
Emmanuel Sanders gets a touchdown. George Kittle gets a touchdown. I felt like Oprah. You get a touchdown. You get a touchdown. Everybody get a touchdown. And Drew Brees over here jumping over the pile like he's still in his 20s back at Purdue. Man, this game was awesome.
Yes, it was, man. It was like watching backyard football or something, man. It was just crazy. So many different variables. Everybody getting a chance to participate. Hey, you off the bench. You want some too? All right, cool. You can get in and you can go in for a couple series. Then you get a first down. Okay, cool. We're going to rotate the other guy back in. And there was a lot of different moves they had on offense as well. A lot of trick plays. Receivers throwing the ball, and I'm like, this game is live, man. It's like, as a defensive coordinator, it was a nightmare because you're just sitting there like, man, look, at this point, I don't even know what I want to do anymore. Y'all just go out there and score more than them, and we'll just see who get the ball last and kind of go from there. And then Robbie Gould, right, comes in with that foot, saves the day, and I'm pretty sure that his previous team is like, man, it'd be nice to have that again, but
oh man.
So
gotta have a decent kicker nowadays.
Yeah, right. Nowadays you need the kicker. Like everybody's like, oh man, we'll just get somebody that can hit a 35 yard field goal and we'll get a bunch of extra points and all that and we're good. It's like, no, man, a lot of these games these days are coming down to that kicker who can, hit some decent shots. Speaking of which, and I'll say this just one time before I get off of the AFC North. Seibert, when I saw him hit that 53-yarder today, I'm like, man, it made you go back to the beginning of last season, right? Those first couple games, and you're like, the whole kicking situation just wasn't working out for them. And coming off of a winless season, and then to have the kind of season you had last year, and the first couple games to be down to a kicker, and then to have this guy this year, it's like, man, my mind went instantly back to that moment. But to see him kick a 53-yard field goal, I'm like, wow, this is his longest connection that he's had in the NFL so far. And, you know, hats off to him, and, you know, doing that and being somebody who's basically came in and said, okay, I got y'all covered. I can definitely get this done for you. Just trust in me. Let me be the guy. And he's been that guy. And hopefully they can, you know, get that offense together. But I'm done with that. I'm done with the AFC North, man. Let's keep moving. I'm sorry. My bad.
Yeah, I'm still a fan of Phil Dawson, but, you know, that's just me.
Yeah. It was cool to see him, you know, retire as a Brown, though. He came back for that 1 week. You know what I mean? So that was cool. I appreciate him for doing that.
Yeah. I think they could have called him out last year, but, you know, stubborn management.
Yeah.
Okay, I did want to touch on this. I wanted to tie both subjects in because they do have to tie into the playoffs. So I might as well just start with one and tie into the other. With that win, it put San Francisco ahead of Green Bay for the playoffs, for the number 1 seed in the playoffs in the NFC.
Yes.
As of right now, New Orleans is the only team to clinch the division. Now, if you look at tonight's Sunday night game with LA and Seattle, LA is up 20-3.
Man.
Now, 21-3. My bad. Finally kicked the extra point. Now, with that being said, Los Angeles is at the 7th spot. Seattle is 5th. Yes, Seattle's probably going to make it in at 11-5, or I'll say maybe 12-4.
Mm-hmm.
I can see them in the San Fran again. But I'm looking at number 4, which is Dallas, at 6-7. They still lead the division.
Man.
And Chicago is at 8th. LA is at 7th. Minnesota is at 6th. There are two NFC North teams in the hunt to move up or move down. My question is, what in the blue hell is going on in Dallas and Chicago? This is not what I expected from either team. I expected Chicago to be running the North right now, but that's not the case. For some, I think the football guys might be smiling on Jerry Jones for right now, because Dallas still leads the division.
That's crazy.
At 6-7, yeah, I don't know how that works either. But tomorrow night, New York, Philly, that could have.
I'm sorry, man. My bad.
Don't make me laugh. New York and Philly, that could have not a big impact, but I know it can be impactful on the division, because Dallas 6-7. Philly wins tomorrow, they'll be 6-7.
Man.
They're gonna work with these last 4 games, because I don't see, somebody's got to get at least 9 wins to make the playoffs in the NFC, and that's the crazy part. You can be 9-7 or 8-8 and make the playoffs in the NFC. That's how loaded the NFC is. Now, I wanted to know from your view, if Philly wins tomorrow, does that shake up the playoff standings a little bit if Dallas cannot keep control of the division?
It definitely does, because Dallas right now, other than Cincy, I believe, is the only team that hasn't still beaten a team that is 500 or more record-wise. Like, all 7 of those losses came to teams that were at least 500. It's like, wow. I don't know how that works in the postseason. And then when it comes down to Philly winning definitely shakes it up a little bit. I feel like in that division between those two, and then you got the Giants, it's just looking real ugly. And like you said, to your point with the NFC, with the playoffs, how you can pretty much be 8-8 or 9-7 and get in. This takes me back to Seattle, right? So I remember Seattle getting in the playoffs at 7-9, and that's the year when Cleveland was 10-6,
And missed the playoffs.
Right. Same thing with Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay was 10-6 that year and missed the playoffs, right? And they in the NFC. And I was like, hold on, wait. How you 10-6 and you on the couch, right? Flipping burgers, whatever else you're doing to watch them games, man, having a Madden matchup, however you get ready. And all of a sudden, you're looking at this 7-9 team that comes in here first round in the wild card round. You're like 7-9. How are you 7-9? Literally 3 more losses than we do, and you're in the playoffs. But here we are watching you. That's just crazy to me. I don't understand that. And it comes down to one of those scenarios again, where, like you said, it's going to be an 8-8 or 7-9 team coming out of that division to get a wild card spot. It just makes no sense, man. It makes no sense. But when you see how lopsided it is, and you have, the 49ers up there and the Saints, and then you got Green Bay, and you have all these teams with these double-digit wins already, and you're just like, look, I mean, it almost calls for one of those teams to be in there just to be in.
Yeah, because at the current moment, 4 out of the 6 teams playoff ready. If the playoffs would start tomorrow, 4 out of the 6 teams have 10 or more wins.
Crazy.
San Francisco, Green Bay, New Orleans, and Seattle all have 10 wins or more.
Wow. That's crazy.
So whoever got that wild card, I feel bad.
Right. It's like all on one side too. Because you figure on the AFC, all you have is New England, Baltimore, right? And then the Chiefs didn't have 10 wins yet, right?
They just won today, and they locked up the division, so they are 9-4.
See, that's what I'm saying, man. See, that just makes it a little bit more competitive on the AFC side for that spot. But with the NFC, man, like you said, 4 out of 6, double digits already. We still got 3 weeks left. Like, it's a crazy scenario to even watch that, man.
It's gonna be all bad these last 3 weeks, 4 weeks actually. So we'll see.
But like you said, somebody looking out for Jones, man. Somebody is, because I feel like them suckers, man, or I'm sorry, the Cowboys might actually sneak in this year based off of just the lopsided in this other NFC. So we'll just see what happens and how it plays.
Yeah, but even if they sneak in, it's not guaranteed. 1 and 2 have byes, so that means 3, 4, 5, and 6 have to play each other. So if I'm remembering correctly, it's 4 against 5, 3 against 6. Correct?
Oh yeah, that's definitely it.
So if they make it 4 against 5, they gotta play Seattle. And that's just if the playoffs started tomorrow and they do not get a win anymore this season, or they don't win out the rest of the season, and but somehow still hold on to the division. So whatever happens, I really hope the Cowboys would do better. You got Zeke Elliott, you got Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup's coming of age. Dak, you want this contract, but come on, man. I mean, I get it. The offensive line ain't what you think it is, but Ezekiel Elliott's averaged over 50 yards since he's come back a game, 1 to 2 touchdowns. Something's working for him. So why isn't it working for you?
Exactly. And then on top of that, man, like just since you said that, Seattle. So you figure if it started today, it'd be Seattle. And then the way it plays out the rest of the year, like you said, you got New Orleans up there, you got the 49ers and Green Bay, and I'm just like, man, like there's no way they're going to get away from either playing Seattle or Green Bay in the wild card. In a wild card, like just saying it out loud is like, oh, okay, one of those two in the wild card game. Wow. Okay, cool.
Nah.
Like, could you imagine like an 11-win, 12-win team in the wild card round against a team that barely has 8 wins?
Man, we have seen some surprises, but the way the Cowboys are playing, I'd expect a one and done, but that's just me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. I'm sorry. I'm not impressed by them at all. There's a lot of, hopeful fans out there, ride or die, bleed the blue and everything else, America's team, whatever. I mean, shout out to them for being diehard. 'Cause trust me, I grew up in Cleveland. I'm diehard. I get you. I definitely get you. But the way the season looked, it's like on both sides of the ball, man, special teams, just the fact that you can't beat a team above 500. I don't know how far you think you're going to go. And then you got people like, oh, it's Super Bowl this. I'm like, yeah, okay. All right. That's cool. Thanks for talking. Let's keep it moving. Next subject, whatever. I just kind of just blow all that off, man, because I've had issues with this in the past, and I still do recently, where I'm glad that we do this show, because to have folks with a unbiased opinion when it comes to something like football or the teams that they support is very, very hard to find, And I'd run to a lot of that when I'm having discussion with people outside the show. And they're just like, man, giving me lip about wins and losses or about statistics that don't matter, or trying to say one team is better than the other because of the amount of points they're throwing up and regardless, whatever. And I don't know, a lot of that, man, it's like I just need more factual conversation. I need something that kind of strengthens what that individual point is they're trying to make. And that's something I struggle with, and I got to kind of take a step back. So I'm admitting that openly to those listening. I'm admitting it openly.
Well, the first road to recovery is admitting the problem.
Yes, sir.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to touch on championship weekend and throw a little special something in there for the folks listening. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, folks, and we are back. We talked about the NFL and how the playoff standings are going to look and what we thought might happen and should happen within the next 4 weeks. But now I wanted to do this because this was something that's near and dear to my heart. Ronnie, I'm pretty sure it's near and dear to yours. State championship weekend just came and went. And with that, we have the complete list of all 6 high school Ohio State champions, starting off in D6. Anna wins their first state title ever that I can actually look up, because I did look this up. So Anna won their first state title in D6. In D5, no surprise here, Kirtland, back-to-back state champions. D4, Clyde Flyers win their first state title. And just before I go any further, I remember playing in semi-pro. I remember playing the Northeast Ohio Raiders, and I had no idea where the hell Clyde was. And just my luck, it's out by the Toledo area. So thankfully, I knew where we were. But man, when I tell you this school's in the middle of nowhere, So congratulations to the Clyde Flyers, because they deserved it and they earned it. In D3, Trotwood Madison wins their state championship again. And as we all have seen, Trotwood Madison keeps a decent team, and they've won state championships before. And, when they got a team that's going, they're going. In D2, here's the one that's going to blow your mind. Cincinnati LaSalle blows out Massillon Washington 34-17, winning the state championship in Division 2. Now, a lot of people, because I know a few people who are diehard Canton McKinley fans, Canton McKinley alumni, do not discard or discredit Massillon, because Massillon, let them tell it as a historian of some sorts, have the most state championships in state history, and haven't been back in a while. So for those kids to make it back and the city stood behind them, shout out to them, and they deserved it, even though they came up short. Cincinnati LaSalle is a good team.
Mm-hmm.
You can't deny Cincinnati play football at the high school level just like Cleveland does in the Northeast Ohio area. So shout out to Cincinnati LaSalle. In D1, Pickerington Central beats Cincinnati Elder to win their championship. Now, to me, this was a big game because, Pickerington Central keeps a good team. Ohio State happens to recruit from there a lot, especially the linemen.
Yes.
Elder, hostile environment. I've seen them play. Very good team. It's not often you get to see a matchup like this, but Pickerington Central squeaked out the win, and shout out to Pickerington Central. The Columbus area has finally got them a state championship. First time in a while that I can remember. So, congrats to all the high schools that won. For the schools that didn't win, as always, next year, and we'll see you guys. We're looking forward to hearing about you guys again. Your take on it?
Well, honestly, I would say this. First of all, Mel, like you said, congratulations to all the first-time winners. It's one of those things where you keep hearing about all these other big schools or the traditions of some of these other teams have been around for a while, and you're like, you know what? We're sick of that. We want to do our own thing. We want to make sure we come out and show everybody we have what it takes to be on that stage, man. And a lot of these first-time teams did that. As far as Pickerington knocking off Elder, huge win, right? Really huge win. I mean, we were hearing about Elder growing up and also us playing high school football together as well. And that's one of those teams you just kind of knew, like, man, they're going to be around for a while. They're like real deep with it. I mean, they pretty much probably take a football from day one and put it in the baby's crib, or something
just
like
that. Massillon.
Yeah, that's how Massillon, man. Put a tiger in the crib, man, as soon as you're born. Probably dress you in stripes or something, like with the baby outfit or whatever at the hospital. I mean, it's pretty deep. And the thing is, to see these teams come out and play the way that they did, to say, hey, this is our time to shine. I'm really hoping that a team like Pickerington or some of these other ones that either haven't had a championship in a while or just got their first one, make it back next year to have a repeat, man. It'd be a great story to cover, to see somebody who, wasn't really out there or named as much, to start somewhat of a dynasty feel, to kind of have multiple state titles back to back, and just to kind of see where they go from here, man. And shout out to those coaching staffs. It's definitely not easy to coach high school boys to play football. Let's just keep it real. And it's not. I'm just really thankful that they're all here in the States or whatever, and so close. And then me being in Columbus, being able to kind of get a feel for that too. Just shout out to Pickerington and what they're able to do, man. I'm sure I'm gonna be able to go to work Tuesday, and hear that all day, every day while I'm there for the rest of the week. So shout out to them once again, and also for the type of talent they put out year after year.
Yeah, it's Kirtland right now in Division 5 has got a stranglehold on that division, and that coaching staff and that tree of from Pee-wee to middle school to high school is just phenomenal out there.
Absolutely.
All right. From high school, we jumped to college in Division 3, the quarterfinals. You're not going to believe me when I tell you this, but I'm going to start over in the left side of the bracket. North Central dominates Delaware Valley 31-14 after that, what you would call shootout at the OK Corral with Mount Union. North Central gets back to defense and holds Delaware Valley to 14 points. On the top of that bracket, Muhlenberg beats Salisbury 24-6, or no, 24-8. Sorry, and of course, Wheaton and St. John's. Wheaton loses to St. John's by 1 point, 34-33. Now, this is why I said totally heartbreaking. I know what it's like to lose by 1 point. I hate it. I would have rather got blown out, but that's just me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the one that shocks everyone. I didn't tell you this, but I wanted to keep this a secret because I knew this was going to be the biggest shock of the weekend in Division 3. Wisconsin Whitewater goes down to Texas and chills out Mary Hardin Baylor 26-7.
Ooh, in Texas atmosphere?
Man.
Ooh.
Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing about this. We knew, well, I knew, most of the people who follow Division 3 knew. Whitewater has been to the mountain. They've seen what the mountaintop looks like. So you knew it was going to be a game. What I originally thought was it was going to be a tougher game for Whitewater because you're playing in Texas and you knew about the atmosphere.
Right.
Here's the stat line. Whitewater held Mary Hardin Baylor to 140 yards of total offense.
Ooh.
While amassing 358 yards of total offense.
Wow.
2 turnovers, 1 interception, 1 fumble lost, and only 1 touchdown, which was in the second quarter. I was not expecting this, but the defense showed up and showed out for Whitewater.
Man, let me tell you. So, going to atmosphere like that, playing that way, coming up the next week, your defense woke up, and then all of a sudden you're like, all right, let's just play our best game and, do what we need to do to get this dub. Honestly, I look at a game like this and I go, okay, the coaching staff obviously made some adjustments, right, between last week and this week. And to hold a team to that low of an amount of offense, that's hard to do at any level. I don't care if you Division 3, Division 2, Division 1, the high school level. To be able to do that, right, regardless of who you're facing, is not easy, especially from the defensive side. I can tell you for a fact, when you hold somebody down like that for the whole game and then your offense just runs wild, shout out to the coaching staff. That's the best thing I could say regarding that game. Is shout out to the coaching staff.
And mind you, the last 2 weeks, Mary Hardin Baylor been averaging 40 points a game.
Right.
And you go into this game thinking, all right, they got at least 30 in them. And you look at the score and you see 7. Man, Whitewater was ready for this game. Now, as we all knew, we're going to jump to Division 2 because this was where the money was for us.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of shockers, a lot of games we expected. So we'll start at the bottom of the bracket. What was that? Oh yeah. Ohio Dominican loses to Truman State 21-7. Nebraska Kearney puts up 50 on Winona State. Eastern New Mexico, 20. Southern Arkansas 3. Missouri Western 35. Henderson State 14. Texas A&M Commerce gets trounced by Minnesota State 42-21. As expected, a shootout between West Florida and Lenore-Rhine. West Florida squeaks that one out 43-38. Ferris State handles... Oh, wait. Just let me start over. Because here are the 2 shockers. Not necessarily a shocker, but one's a spoiler. One breaks my heart, but that's okay. Ferris State, 25. Northwest Missouri State, 3. Oof. So not only are we going to see a new Division 2 champion, but we're not going to see Northwest Missouri State like we expected. I expected Ferris State to give them a run for their money, but again, defense shows up and they show out. So, you know, looking at this, next week is going to be really fun.
Man, it's looking like at this point, we don't even know who the champion going to be in this division. I mean, there's been a lot of talk of what we felt would happen or what teams we thought would get there. And based off of just not only statistics, but also historically and what's been happening in the last 3 to 5 years. And this year, I'm like, hey, you know, when that champion gets crowned, man, it's going to be a team that it feel like no one saw coming.
Yeah. Now, for the big one and the one that hurt the most, even though it wasn't, I'm proud of the way that they played, but too much defense, and it hurt to see it go out this way. But Slippery Rock sends Notre Dame home 65-59 in what really was a downright shootout.
Yes.
And what was so crazy about this game was that the beginning of the game, and I sat and watched this game as best I could. The beginning of the game, Notre Dame had it in hand.
Yes.
And they were up 21-7. And then all of a sudden, Slippery Rock's defense kicks in. The crowd gives you momentum. And before you know it, it's 21-24, 31-24, 38-21. And I'm just like, oh my God, what's going on? And finally, I want to say, you know, Coach Jacobs had this team ready, but when you're at Slippery Rock, you already know it's just a different atmosphere. And because it's a different atmosphere out there, you know, it's kind of hard to fight through a game with this magnitude. But shout out to Slippery Rock's defense. They came through at the end with an interception.
Yes.
And home to win, and they advanced.
And with Slippery Rock, I mean, for us being from the Cleveland area, right, and seeing Notre Dame to get this far was pretty cool. I mean, we had a couple of folks we went to high school with that went there. You know, you drive through South Euclid, Ohio, and you see the college there, and, you know, just based on the outside, driving by the gate and everything, you don't really notice a whole lot that's going on in there. So to kind of see this team come out this year and to be in the playoffs and to get past the first round, it's definitely something that they should be proud of. I feel like they may have a strong case to do it again next year, but we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But like you said, man, that Slippery Rock atmosphere, we've both been on that campus before. It's definitely beautiful. They probably have a very, very, you know, dedicated fan base in there too, because you know how Ohio and PA get down when it comes to football, just in general.
Oh man!
So I mean, you know, the fans are dedicated, and when they know an Ohio school's coming to play, they're gonna show up. So I can only imagine what that was like being there and how it was to play in front of those fans, man. And you know, shout out Slippery Rock for getting that win this week. We'll see how they can do next week when they go up against the next opponent.
Right. Unfortunately, the brackets weren't finished by the time we pulled our show up, so we'll have to wait and see who Slippery Rock will be facing next week. But I'm pretty sure it's going to be a battle, whoever it is, because if more than likely you got to go to Slippery Rock, you're in for a long day if you cannot keep that crowd quiet.
Absolutely.
All right. From that, we're going to take one more quick commercial break. And then we're really going to touch on what everybody wants to talk about, D1 college football championship weekend, and a lot of surprises. Some are not surprises, and some people are just plain old pissed off. So stick with us, and we'll be right back. All right, and we are back. And we talked about D2 and D3 and a little bit of the high school last segment. This segment, championship weekend in Division 1. I'm going to start off because this one really let me down. The Pac-12 championship, Utah falls to Oregon 37-15. And it wasn't even close. Oh my God. So the one time I root for a team that nobody's supposed to be paying attention to, they let me down. Utah got there and Oregon's defense just wanted to magically show up this day. I'm not going to say how pissed off I was about this, but I am going to say this screwed up my whole college football playoff bracket.
You know, I think for a lot of people, Mel, in that game, they felt like Utah was going to be that team that got the chance to have a Pac-12 team be a part of the CFP once again. And with that happening, it's just like, man, where do you go from here? I mean, there was definitely a strong case to be able to not have Oklahoma in it if Utah would have won that game. And then with that happening, I know Oklahoma was like, well, since they got the job done, and let's go ahead and make that happen. And speaking of that game, and I know that Utah was unfortunately not able to control the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, that was the part that surprised me because Utah has at least 4 defensive players that are gonna be drafted at some point during next year's draft, and 2 of them that I know for certain are defensive linemen. My thing with this was you've had one of the best defenses quietly in all of college football this year. What in the hell happened as soon as you saw Oregon that just made you, okay, yeah, coach, we wasn't ready for this?
It felt like the hype got to them mentally, and for you to let them run all over you like that just didn't make any sense. I mean, you figure in that game you had C.J. Verdell, carries the ball only 18 touches, 18 the whole game, and he runs for 208 yards and 3 touchdowns. It's like, were y'all ready for that? How does this look going in? Did you see it on film? Like, did you not think Oregon was going to run the ball? I mean, especially in a West Coast style offense, you think they're not going to run? I don't understand how you let them get 208 yards on the ground. That's crazy to me.
Not only that, they held Tyler Huntley, he should have been a Heisman front runner, but that game probably killed that for this year anyway. They held him to 193 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Man.
And those 2 touchdowns came in the third quarter when it was already 23-0. So, I think Utah is almost there, but they have to get used to the bright lights. Granted, Utah been building up for this moment, but when you build up for a moment like this, you have to finish it out, because as you've seen in college football, there's always a team waiting for you to slip up, and you just happen to slip up. Once Bama went down a second time, everybody's like, oh man, great. It's a scramble for that 4th spot. You want to be there, you got to hold on to it. And they screwed the pooch, fucked up my whole bracket, man. I'm sorry, but I was so mad about that game. I was really pulling for Utah.
I was too, man. I sat there and I watched that and I'm thinking, okay, here we go. Let's see if they can turn around. And even with the first half, I'm thinking, okay, maybe y'all just came out flat. Maybe there'll be some adjustment to half, and still nothing. And I'm like, man, where do you go from here? Because when that third quarter started, I had hopes, and then I lost them really quick.
Yeah, that they blew the doors off. And it's like, yeah, because everybody in my house was just looking at me crazy. Like, yo, what's going on with you? I'm sitting up here yelling at the TV, and I couldn't understand why nobody was just paying attention to the fact of, hey, this game is important. You might want to throw a fight up, put your guards up, do something. And it's like, you know what? Third quarter, screw it.
Right.
You guys got it. So shout out to Oregon. I'm pretty sure they're probably looking at a Rose Bowl or a Cotton Bowl berth, whichever one. I haven't got a chance to see the remaining bowl schedule, but it's looking like Rose Bowl for Oregon.
Oh yes, they will be in the Rose Bowl against Wisconsin.
In
Oregon, Rose Bowl.
How many times we gonna see that?
Right, I'm like, oh, okay, again. Okay, cool. This is weird. They're probably one of the few teams that are not in the same conference that see each other a lot.
Yeah.
So.
And good luck to them. Now from that, we jump to. I wanted to touch on it. We're going to go through a whole championship Sunday or Saturday, but these two really have an impact on the Cotton Bowl because with these two games, it's the highest team ranked that makes it to the Cotton Bowl this year. Mm-hmm. And for the group of five, this is a big deal because not only does it mean big money, but it also can help in recruiting and, giving your conference the light that it needs and the stage that it needs to perform. So, in the Sun Belt, Appalachian State tops Louisiana 45-38. This drops Louisiana to 0-8 against Appalachian State.
Wow.
And it just looked like watching this game, Appalachian State came in with a purpose. They accomplished their mission, and they just got to hope and pray that, they get the stage that they need. Because Appalachian's been a great team that nobody talks about for years now.
True.
And you cannot deny the talent coming out of Appalachian State.
Yeah, Appalachian State's one of those teams where they've been knocking off some of these big names forever, and on top of that, to see them, in this conference and to be making a name for themselves, it kind of has that same feel of like a UCF right now where they're dominating, they're getting a lot of points, having a really strong win streak, and not really getting a whole lot of love for it because of the conference that they're in. I kind of feel like with this team, I believe they were ranked 21 going into that game. I just feel as though, they're going to have their fun in the next bowl game that they're in, and we'll kind of have to wait and see how they're ranked next year starting out. But I think they have a chance to be put, as high as like 20 or 19 going into the beginning of next year.
Right. And, even with that, I still think they can make it into the top 10 because they play like a top 10 team every game. They've only had one loss, and it's always to, the big group of Power 5 conferences. So it's not like they're losing to their own conference. They come in with a purpose every year, and they're winning the Sun Belt. You just got to look at it as, when are you going to give these guys a shot? So we'll see next year, but I'm betting Appalachian State's program is going to be solid for the next few years.
Me too.
Okay, from that we go to the American Conference, and I saw this coming, and I'm not going to say I called it, but this was a better game than last week. Memphis wins the American Conference 29-24 over Cincinnati. Tough to beat a team twice, but they did it.
I feel like with this game, Mel, I was definitely impressed by Memphis. And like you said, when you play the same team twice, that can either work in your favor or work against you. With this game, the top stat that were obtained was Brady White, 8 for 40, which isn't really a great percentage, but he threw for 253 yards and a touchdown. The most notable one would have been Antonio Gibson. He went for 130 yards off of 11 carries and a touchdown. So not much touches needed for him to get his yards. And of course, Devontae Coxey had 165 receiving yards off of only 9 catches. So Memphis definitely,
that's a bad boy right there.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I can definitely see him on Sunday. So, we'll see if that plays out.
Who can? Yeah, but let's just call it what it is. This is nothing but the remnants of the Big East, and ever since Miami, Boston College, Virginia Tech, Pittsburgh left, the Big East / American Conference has not been the same. It is competitive, but you have to look at it from the standpoint that they're rebuilding that conference back up.
True.
And with Memphis and Cincinnati playing each other, this makes the conference noticeable. I know everybody thinks that these Power 5 conferences don't really, have a lot to offer, but there's a lot to offer. A lot of these schools, I would have took Cincinnati over Rutgers in the Big Ten if I had it my way.
Me too.
Just be
honest. Man.
But it didn't work out that way, so we got to see crappy Rutgers every year. But if me personally, I'm going to touch on the Cincinnati thing in a minute, but just looking at this conference top to bottom, there are some competitive teams, and to have 2 teams ranked in the top 25 speaks volumes for the American Conference.
It does. It definitely does. And like you said, man, I agree with you in terms of, wishing that Cincinnati would have been a part of the Big Ten over Rutgers. And unfortunately, it comes down to that TV money. For Rutgers, with them giving that Big Ten presence in New York, and the same thing with, Maryland trying to give Big Ten presence in DC. That's the only thing I can see, that them 2 teams being put in the Big Ten, man. Just expanding that.
Man, Maryland should have stayed in ACC where they belong. Man. Ain't nobody. Maryland's a hooper school. Nobody cares.
Right.
Like, y'all ain't been good since Boomer Esiason left and Frank Reich was there, man. Come on, cut it out.
Yeah, it ain't gonna change either. Not anytime soon.
Yeah. Okay. From the American Conference, we jump to the Mountain West, and this one was no surprise. Boise State 31, Iowa 10. Cole McDonald throws for 241 yards, but 1 interception, and it was all Boise from the get. It started out tough, but once that second quarter hit, Boise State just took over. And this is no surprise. It's Boise State. Boise State's been like this for the better half of a decade and a half. So do you, and I know this is the dumb question I'm going to ask, well, the dumb question of the day, but do you think at some point Boise State has to just not necessarily move, but do you think the Pac-12 comes calling Boise State at some point? I know it sounds crazy, but in my head, Boise State's been on a lot of primetime TV games.
True.
And they have got it set up now to where they only play primetime games unless it's a league-sanctioned game. So with them dominating the Mountain West, do you think it's feasible that the Pac-12 might come calling at one point?
I do. I feel like with this team, they probably should have been in there years back, at least 5 years back. With Boise State, I mean, the type of national presence, like you said, that they have, and the stages that they've been on, and the lights and all of that, like they've been in a lot of big bowl games too. And at this point, with the Pac-12 kind of struggling right now, I guess to in the have, you gotta look at teams like, okay, UCLA and Cal, and think to yourself, do you still want to maintain having these teams? Is it because they're in California? Is it because of the sake of tradition, or over the years you could never just see that happening and then moving around? I mean, it's like, can we get past that and get in the Pac-12 at this point? I feel like they need to be a lot more competitive for them to be in there. I think it'll help their recruiting, and quite frankly, I don't see the Pac-12 blossoming anytime soon. I think they will get back there only because of the new ruling with, players getting paid and stuff like that. for their likeness and everything else. I feel like because California was the first to jump on that, that's going to help out the Pac-12 a lot. But yeah, Boise definitely needs to get that phone call, man. It's overdue. It's well overdue.
Yeah. Yeah, I know a lot of people are going to be listening and be like, man, why would you even say that? But you got to remember, Boise State went into the Fiesta Bowl and beat Oklahoma. Doesn't matter how many points they beat them by. They won.
Yep.
Bowl game, top bowl game. Not no Holiday Bowl or the Idaho Potato Bowl. They went to the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl and beat Oklahoma. They've beaten top 10 teams year in and year out at some point throughout the last 15 years.
Exactly.
You can't deny that. Numbers don't lie. When you beat teams, that sticks. So I don't see why this would not be something to think about, because let's face it, Boise State even went down and beat Florida State. Florida State ain't never lost to a team from Idaho ever.
Man.
So that should speak volumes. Yes, Florida State's crappy right now, going through a coaching change. But that does not stop the fact that they went into a hostile environment, daytime TV on the East Coast, and won. I'm crazy. I'll be crazy, but I think I could see that happening, and I think that could jump and bolster Pac-12 in a lot of ways.
Hey, man, you know, I'll say this. I don't think you're crazy at all. And you know why I don't think you're crazy? Because you, my friend, predicted the upset of Minnesota over Penn State. Let me just throw it out there. All right. We can be crazy, man. Let them call us crazy. We don't know what we're talking about. That's great. That's cool. But I feel like, hey, you put that out there. Maybe we got to be nuts to make predictions like this. So at the end of the day, Boise State, you deserve a phone call.
It wouldn't be a bad addition either. But, you know, that's not for us to decide. That's for the committee to decide. Okay, now we jump from that to HBCU, SWAC championship. Alcorn State pulls out the win, and they win handily almost, beating, was it Southern University? I think it was like 30-something to 21, 24 or something like that. Looks like, from what I could see, it could be a matchup between Florida A&M and Alcorn State in the Celebration Bowl. I'm if that happens, I'm intrigued to see that one, because I with Florida A&M's top passer and Alcorn State's defense, somebody's gonna have to give. And when you look at it on paper, you think Alcorn State defensively can handle it. But a lot of teams in the MEAC have struggled playing it, and even D1 teams have struggled playing Florida A&M because of their passing game this year.
True. Very good.
So it'll be interesting to see what the Celebration Bowl holds for Florida A&M and or Alcorn State, but I'm expecting one hell of a game between those two, just because. Now, from that, we go to Conference USA. And Conference USA, I keep telling people you have to watch Conference USA, because Conference USA has a lot of sleeper teams. And one of those sleeper teams just so happened to be Florida Atlantic.
Mm-hmm.
Florida Atlantic beats UAB soundly in blowout fashion, 45 to 3, I believe. And they are Conference USA champions. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Lane Kiffin was the head coach of Florida Atlantic, correct?
Yes.
So with this win, he takes over the Ole Miss job. And a lot of these offshoot games or group of 5 games are going to play into our conversation in a few minutes about the D1, the college football playoffs. So Lane Kiffin, he's leaving. He gets the championship. He gets over to Ole Miss. Does this momentum carry over to Ole Miss, and does it bring Ole Miss back to SEC prominence in your eyes?
I would hope so. I mean, Ole Miss is one of those teams where they're gritty. You know, they got a lot of tradition, man. they tend to usually put out some really decent offensive players. I mean, we could probably argue about, Eli Manning. That's one thing. But outside of him, that's where guys like DK Metcalf went to. I mean, that receiver for last year, it was ridiculous to see how big they were, how athletic they were, how fast they were. It's just that Ole Miss didn't have a defense. But the way they were offensively, they could definitely go toe-to-toe with anybody last year, but the problem was they just couldn't stop no one. But they definitely have some good recruiting up there, and I feel like it'll be nice to see them get back to where they kind of have teams like that, or like a, Tennessee, or even the most recent signing as well, Arkansas. Georgia's offensive line coach is now their new head coach at Arkansas.
Yeah, so saw that too.
A lot of changes happening, man. A lot of guys being rotated within the conference, and it'll just be exciting to kind of see what 2020 holds. But I do feel like Ole Miss can definitely get back to what they used to be with Lane Kiffin, with the right recruiting.
Yeah, I've heard he's a great coach. He's just a piece of work. But I ain't never met the man, so I'm a reserve.
Right.
Another interesting game this weekend before we get to the big 3 or 4. Miami of Ohio and Central Michigan in the MAC championship. And surprise, Miami of Ohio wins the MAC 26-21 over Central Michigan.
Man.
Like I said earlier, these group of 5 games, especially the conference championship and the MAC championship, are going to play into this conversation. But to see Miami of Ohio power out and get the job done, you got to see the MAC is good. I think the MAC's coming back to where it was a couple years back when Toledo was giving Miami fits and Kent State was holding on with Kentucky. I'm thinking within the next year or so, the MAC is going to be a problem for anybody who schedules them thinking it's going to be an easy win.
Absolutely. And, the MAC for a long time was always full of what we call these upset universities. And it's always been a lot of great talent coming out of that conference as well. I mean, you got the likes of Antonio Brown from a MAC school, Ben Roethlisberger, and to see guys like that, or even go even further back with Byron Leftwich and Chad Pennington when Marshall used to be a part of the MAC. It's just so many different names of players that have come out of that, and the kind of pedigree that they are. Because remember, these are teams that are players, I should say, who potentially could have went to, OSU or one of the bigger conferences like that, and ended up getting that opportunity to play at a Toledo or a Northern Illinois or a BG or Ohio University, something like that. And, like you said, man, it's going to be one of those games where you can't take them for granted. Otherwise, you might actually get upset.
Right. And a lot of people don't pay attention to this or even know this. The greatest, I ain't going to call him the greatest, but he is, of the last 20 years, the best coach in all of college football, came from Kent State. Nick Saban played quarterback. So, don't act like the MAC can't play football. I just think if you quit taking players from the HBCUs and the MAC, I think talent would be even all across the board, but that's just me. It's always going to be a scramble for talent, so you can't really argue with the fact that it's going to take a couple years, but I think the MAC will be back.
Definitely.
All right. This, once again, my bracket was screwed up, but we're going to continue anyway. Oklahoma and Baylor in the Big 12 championship. Baylor loses in overtime, 30-23. Did you see this game being as close as it was, or did you see Oklahoma running away with it?
I thought Oklahoma was going to run away with it. I mean, what shocked me the most, Mel, was in that game, right, when it came down to even looking at the first half, I'm like, okay, Baylor's up by a little bit, small margin. It was a shock to even see that and to see Oklahoma have to work from behind. But for that game to go to overtime, for it to be the only overtime game, and then for Oklahoma to pretty much shock them and get a really quick touchdown, by the way, if I might add, is pretty crazy to me. Jalen Hurts, I mean, he's been on this kind of stage before. For him to be out there is really good for that program, especially after having, 2 back-to-back Heisman winners, and then all of a sudden to have, someone like that transfer from Alabama to come play with you is huge for them going into the CFP. He had 17 of 24 for 287 and 1 touchdown. And then also you had CD Lamb that had 8 receptions for 173. But for Baylor to be up 13-10 at the half and then to lose this one as a nail biter, as I would call it, 30-23, it's just crazy, man. I did not see it going down like that. I thought that Oklahoma actually would have had win by a bigger margin than what they did against Baylor. But hats out to them and what they did defensively to kind of slow the Sooners down, man. It was a good game overall, though.
Man, I keep telling y'all, man, when you see Jalen Hurts is a different animal. And the fact that he's seen the SEC and the ACC for the last 3 years helped out Oklahoma a lot. Yes. Just because, you know what kind of defense you're going to see against Baylor. And I think he knew that going into this game. This is not going to be the same Baylor defense that he saw week 8, week 9, or whatever it was. So, yeah, he had to change it up. And he didn't run as much as he did in the first game, which I expected because they were ready for that. And they were going to hit him. And they did hit him when he did run. So, to see him go 17-24 for 287, I feel like he just gave everybody a big FU in the ACC and the SEC because it's not going to be a cakewalk for LSU. I don't think it is. I just think with this win and them getting into the playoff, I think Hurts has a lot more motivation to push LSU, if not get the win over LSU. I know it sounds crazy, but if you've seen Jalen Hurts in action, it's like looking at Lamar Jackson, just a shorter version of it.
Right.
Hurts is.
And then with Jalen Hurts, too, people have to remember, man, he's already seen LSU the last few years being at Alabama. I mean, that's a rivalry game for, the western side of the SEC, and he's already faced them a few times. It's not like it's going to be his first time seeing that defense. And then also, he went up against them last year. So the thing is,
right,
it's going to be familiar for him, which makes this one of those games where you're like, okay, you got this big-time offense, whatever, going up against them. And people forget that Oklahoma has a pretty explosive offense as well. Because what the Pac-12 does, man, they're known for that. And the thing is, you come into this game and to see something similar like that in the team of LSU, defensively for them, they got their work cut out for them. So I'm expecting a pretty exciting game when those two face off for the first round.
Right. And like I said, just going into this game, I get it. LSU's defense comes through when they need to. It's been dominant all year. Freshman Derek Stingley has been a monster at cornerback. But when you got to actually chase somebody like Jalen Hurts, it's different. It's totally different. And believe me when I tell you, Lincoln Riley, an offensive coordinator, and Jalen Hurts will all be in the same room preparing for this game and figuring out what they can do to slow down LSU's defense.
Absolutely.
All right. I don't even want to talk about this game, but we have to. Virginia and Clemson in the ACC championship. This wasn't even close.
Man.
This wasn't close from the beginning. This was basically Virginia winning the Coastal Division was basically a congratulations. Here's your prize for winning the Coastal. You get to get beat on by Clemson.
Right.
I wouldn't even say Clemson took them to the woodshed. I would just say this was, dare I say, a Joe Jackson moment. It had to be, man. Like the opening drive, I'm thinking if Virginia can at least get 3 points out of this drive, they have a little bit of momentum. And then the interception happens in the back of the end zone. Once I seen that and Trevor Lawrence just smokes them down the field, I already knew this game was a wash because it wasn't even close after that. And there's really nothing to talk about, dude. 62-17. What can you say to that?
Man, he was out there straight looking like Ronnie Bass. I mean, he just took over doing his thing. And I kept saying to myself, Virginia would have had a chance, man, if it was a basketball game. You know, it would have breaks off of Clemson in a basketball game. But right here, when you on the gridiron, I was like, yeah, they just basically got an invitation to get whooped on. And that's pretty much what it is. It would have been the biggest shocker of the year had they pulled that one off. So, you know, hats off.
Unfortunately for Virginia, it didn't work like that.
Yeah, not so much, man.
And one more time, I'm going to ask you not to cuss in the house of the Lord, because every time you should remember this using a Ronnie Bass reference. And everybody's seen Remember the Titans by now, but that didn't really work for us in high school. So I'm trying to forget that part of life. Man. You know, that every time we saw Remember the Titans, we ended up losing. So can we just like not?
Oh yeah. You know.
Not use.
I can definitely do that. Man, I think part of it too was, you know, we just got that Disney Plus subscription and it was on there.
Oh Jesus!
Yeah, it was on there, man. You know, I had to watch it one time just for old time's sake. You know, check it out, and it brought back a lot of good memories and a lot of bad ones. But it's okay.
Well, I'm just glad you ain't playing no more, because you probably would have lost the following week watching that game.
Man, crazy.
All right, moving on. LSU and Georgia in the SEC championship. Now, disclaimer for the folks at home. My boy Ronnie is a Georgia fan. When I saw this game play out the way it did, I literally had to text him to make sure he was okay, because, you know, we got a show to do the next day, and I don't want to hear nothing about you done came up missing and I ain't heard from you. So, you know, I'm glad you're still with us, man, because a lot of Georgia fans was on suicide watch.
Yeah, it was a trip, man. I ain't gonna lie, I was salty. It's funny because with that game, I knew going in that it was going to be a struggle. When I heard about Lawrence Cager going out the week before in practice and him having a significant injury, I'm thinking, well, that's your top receiver going out, right? And then you got a guy who is considered a 5-star recruit at wide receiver getting in fights. And I'm like, well, he's out for the first half, so there's another player down. And then when I saw Dominic Blaylock go down with an ACL injury in the first quarter, I'm like, who are you going to throw to at this point? I don't even know who you have left, to be honest, because you lost 4 wide receivers, okay, last year to the NFL. You have a couple guys who came back where you're like, okay, I can kind of see them looking good, doing their thing. I know Cager was the biggest target, but he's been struggling with injuries pretty much all season at this point. And to have that freshman class, it was like you had 2 guys to shine, but they had their issues with staying healthy as well or off the field. And it looked like, you know, Kirby just had to kind of take a step back and say, look, I may have to do it a little bit different when it comes to the recruiting on the offensive side of the ball. So, you know, that was really hard to watch, man. And then on top of that, it felt like they were trying to do something.
People helps you find the tools people love, and then get them for those you love at the store or shipped to your home. We have even more ways to
sorry about that. I don't know. My computer went retarded for like 5 seconds.
It's all good, man. I was like, okay, maybe I didn't get that commercial break hits.
No, I was trying to pull up a stat, and my computer just, you know, Google has a mind of its own now. I think they spying on it already.
Yeah, man, they probably brought up an advertisement for the Sugar Bowl or something at that point, hearing this conversation. But it's crazy, man, because, like, looking at that game, I'm thinking, okay, not going to be full forced or whatever. Definitely going to test the D. But speaking of the defense, man, they tried to play some sort of game that they don't play at all. Because what Smart did was he looked at the tape from the Auburn game and was just like, okay, we're going to try this, 3-man rush with 1 or 2 in the middle and a whole bunch of DBs to try to, confuse Burrow and all of that. And I'm like, that didn't work.
And he saw right through that.
That was terrible.
Yeah, he saw right through that.
Yeah, it's like it's his second time seeing it now. I mean, the first time, yeah, it made perfect sense. You're like, oh, hasn't tried it before, something different he's not used to. And then this time around, I was like, well, this looks familiar. I made this mistake last time, so I'm going to make this adjustment now and throw this way. And yep, there we go. Back in the end zone. And that's pretty much how that went. They had a lot more success running like a 5-2 against him because they were clogging those lanes up for him to kind of escape from. And it also stopped the run game as well. But when it came down to, trying to have extra coverage or whatever, Georgia just doesn't have that depth at secondary to be able to do that. They have some really good safeties, but when it came to the outside, that was like non-existent. They should have just stuck to their own style of defense that they've been playing all year that held people to, an average of 10.2 points or less all season. It just didn't make sense to me at all what they were trying to do with that. And overall, man, it was just, not only people not being available, but let's just call it what it is, man. Kirby Smart got outcoached heavily.
Yeah.
So,
and let's not take anything away from Ed Orgeron, because that man he's got a mind for football, and a lot of people underestimate him until you see him coaching. The Alabama game was the game where he showed, I can make this adjustment, and when I make this adjustment, you're not gonna like it.
right.
And for you to stop that Bama streak like that should have showed you going into this game, Georgia might have some problems on defense, and it's not just because of the injuries and the suspensions and everything like that. It's just because he knows how to make adjustments when they need to be made and how to make them.
Very true. And that's something that, Kirby Smart as a head coach is still learning, to be able to make those adjustments or to be able to stop adjustments when they're made against him. So that's been his biggest issue he's had over the last 3 seasons, being in, that spotlight and being a part of the conference title game 3 years in a row. It's definitely a great feat to look at regular season wise, but when it comes to the big stage, that's something that he has to, take a step back ego wise and say, hey, let me just get down to the nitty gritty, do what we've been doing, and then also do a better job of trying to recruit some of those key positions that you need to make it happen. So with that happening, they're knocked out of the playoff and they'll face Baylor in the Sugar Bowl.
That is going to be an interesting game.
Yes.
Let's see whose defense shows up in that one. We're going to move from the SEC because we kind of saw that one coming, to the Big Ten and a rematch of week 7 or 8, I believe. Wisconsin and Ohio State. Ohio State pulls away 34-21 in the second half. Now, a lot of people, including myself, thought this game was going to be a tough game for Ohio State because, as I said before, it's always hard to beat a team twice. And Memphis being the exception, and Oklahoma being the exception, you saw it is possible, but it's going to be a tougher game than the first time. First game, Ohio State pulled away from the gate. Second game, Wisconsin gets a 21-14 lead or 21-7 lead. And you're thinking, because I'm going to be honest with you, I looked at that game and Gus Johnson was not helping me on commentary, because I'm sitting up here like, yo, this could get ugly real quick in the second half, man. We might want to have a powwow and see what we can do to change
Exactly.
this. And when they came out, Ohio State scores 17 straight. Now it's a game. So what do you think Ryan Day said at halftime to get them motivated to, finally wake up and say, man, we better than them. Let's just do this and take care of business and go home.
I think what he did, just based off of, the way the first half went, the forced fumble, and then also the sacks that were taken, I literally think that he looked at Justin Fields in the face and said, look, I know you're battling something right now physically. I know you're hurt, right? But there was a reason why you weren't the guy at Georgia. Do you want that to repeat in this game? Because him taking the sacks that he takes is a big concern. And I feel like with him, they just had to get in his face and be like, look, man, you need to lead this team. This is your team. We're not going to win this game unless you can make this happen and help us move this ball down the field. But if you're going to be out here playing the same way you did against Penn State, we're not going to win this game today. I need you to step it up. I feel like he literally grabbed that man by his shoulder pads, shook him a little bit, said, wake the F up, whatever he had to say to him to get him motivated, and literally he came out and turned it around. Because people forget he's still dealing with the injury he had from the previous game. So he wasn't 100%. And it was cool to see him go out there and to be able to still deliver the ball to the receivers that he needed to deliver to. So he's definitely improved a lot over the past year. And I felt like it just took him to go out there and to shake up his quarterback a little bit, get in his face and say, hey, man, I need you to bring it home, and that's exactly what he ended up doing in the second half. And that defense, man, they was playing lights out in the second half. I'm like, you go from allowing them to throw up 21 points on you in the first half to no points in the second half. So definitely shout out to that defense and making that adjustment on their end too.
Yeah, mind you, Justin Fields is only a sophomore. Whether he chooses to leave or not is on him. But if he stays, it's going to be bad next year. 40 touchdowns, 1 interception. He's third in touchdowns in the nation. He's first in interceptions thrown in the nation. And his QBR is third in the nation. That's a bad boy. I don't care how many hits he takes care of the ball. And that's an important stat to me. Now, I hate to discredit Wisconsin, but it was obvious to see in the second half that the talent margin is so wide between Ohio State and the rest of the Big Ten. I think with, I think Penn State's trying to get there because those games have been more competitive than they have in the past. True. But when you really look at it, like position by position, the depth chart and the talent margin is so far apart. You can't really keep up with Ohio State in the Big Ten. Now, whether Clemson can do the same or not is remaining to be seen. But, if you look at that game last night, Chase Young was getting triple teamed. They had a center, guard, and tackle on him. And he still got 6 tackles, 7.5 if you include the tackle for loss that was he was in on. How do you explain that? How do you if you're Ed Orgeron and Chase Young knows Joe Burrow, how do you prepare Joe Burrow if Ohio State gets past Clemson? Matter of fact, how do you prepare Trevor Lawrence for that? Because you got to see this man. If you don't put bodies on him, he's going to have a field day getting back there.
Very true. And with someone like Chase Young going up against the offensive line, I do feel as though Clemson may have a plan for him. They might end up doing a couple of different types of counters or something different with the run game. I feel like it's going to be the key to that in order to kind of sustain him without holding. So I feel like that's what they're going to end up doing, is that maybe a lot more pulls or some kind of trap blocking, something like that to kind of let him come in and allow him to kind of jump a little bit to get inside so they can kind of crack him outside or whatever, or, you know, force him to stay out there and make more plays up the middle. That's going to be the key to moving on that defense. But we'll kind of see what happens with that. I'm not sure if, you know, Dabo Sweeney is going to catch that. Maybe he will. But as far as like dropping back and trying to, you know, give more space between the center and the quarterback, that normally would help you when it comes to a heavy pass rush. But the way that Chase Young rushes the ball, it's almost as if he can make those adjustments full speed to the point where you think he's going to run a little bit further up and maybe over pursue if he step up in the pocket. But with him, he's able to make those adjustments because of his agility. And that's something that a lot of defensive ends kind of struggle with, because we're always known to have more of the north and south game. And as far as being lateral, if you were that lateral, you'd be a linebacker. In this situation, right, Chase Young technically could stand up and play linebacker if he wanted to, and something that might translate in the NFL if he's going to a 3-4 defense. He may end up being an outside linebacker. But anyway, besides all of that, I do feel like that's something that Clemson has to take a look at to figure out how to get him out of the game in terms of him defending their offense. So it'll be interesting to see how it works out, Mel.
Yeah, and this will be a Ohio State-Clemson rematch from a couple years back. Remember, Ohio State saw Clemson 31-0, and I think some of the guys that were still there remember that game. And I think Ryan Day will show them that game and show them what it's like to be dominated. And I think Ohio State comes out with some fire, and this might be the game that everybody should watch outside of, you know, LSU and Oklahoma. I think this would be more of the game to watch, because it's a dynamic offense versus a dynamic defense, and it's bound to blow up somewhere.
Right.
Now that I think about this, Ronnie, here's an interesting stat for you too. Out of all the Power 5 conferences, the Big 12 is the only conference in the college football playoff era, that's 6 years now, or 5 or 6, whatever it is, to not win a playoff game.
Jeez.
They are over. So
that's true, because 2 years ago, that was that thriller in overtime when Georgia beat Oklahoma.
Right. And, you know, Kyler Murray was part of that team. So, you know, he's probably calling Jalen like, look, man, I need you to come through for me on this one, because, you know, Oklahoma, the Big 12, only team that hasn't got a playoff in. Ohio State hasn't won a playoff game since winning it all in 2014. So we'll see how this plays out. All right, we got one more segment to go after this, so we're going to take a commercial break, pay some more bills, and we'll get back with you in a few. All right, folks, we are back with the final segment of our show. I did want to touch on this because this was something that was dear to me really, really quickly. We missed the championship game and the championship Saturday. Well, it was actually Friday night, but Mississippi Gulf Coast in the NJCAA, for those that don't know, this junior college championships, Mississippi Gulf Coast takes the win over Lackawanna, PA, and shout out to Mississippi Gulf Coast. For those of y'all that don't know about the junior colleges, to give you a good idea of it, go on Netflix and watch, what is the name of that show? Second Chance or something like that. you'll see what it's like to be a junior college player trying to get back to major college level. And it's not a hard deal. A lot of guys get a second chance, and that's what junior college football is for you to get a second chance. So for those out there listening, if you think about going to college or you thinking about going back to a D1 college or D2, whatever the case is, junior college is not a bad way to go. They help you, they take care of you, they look out for you, and they make sure you are on your shit when you get back. So once again, shout out to Mississippi Gulf Coast for winning the NJC championship. And, we'll hope to see more NJCAA championship football on ESPN, hopefully somewhere down the line in the future. Now, this part messed me up when we did talk about this earlier. I was kind of mad about this, but we're going to talk about it anyway because my point ties in with all of this. So we talked about it earlier. College football playoff rankings finally came out. LSU 1, Ohio State 2, Clemson 3, Oklahoma 4. Did you expect the rankings to come out like this, or were you expecting something different?
I would say, based off of the fact that they had to put Oklahoma in after those losses that occurred this past week, we did see it playing out that way. I feel like the committee is actually leaning toward wanting to see a LSU-OSU national championship game. I felt like if they went ahead and, put OSU at 1 and then tried to have them go against Oklahoma, I don't feel like Oklahoma would have really had a good game against Ohio State. But I do feel as though they still would have lost, obviously. Oklahoma would have. Even though, with this game, you figure the caliber is different too. If we have Ohio State go up against Clemson, what that does is it gives them a chance to, avenge their loss from a couple of years ago, and then also to be able to say, hey, we knocked them off. Now we're in the title. Let's go ahead and win that. And it's like a better story to kind of cover. So a lot more media coverage, I feel like, is a lot more for them in terms of money being made, things like that with the TV contracts and whatnot. But to have it the other way around, just, for the sake of that reason, didn't make sense to me. I do feel like based off of the statistics, however, and also something that one of the wide receivers from Ohio State said in his statement, he made a point of the fact that, hey, we may not have had like the top schedule or whatever, but at the same time, with these schools that they played, even the non-conference ones, those non-conference teams were in their conference's title game.
Man, you took my thunder. I hate you right now.
That, you know what I mean? And
you stole thunder, man.
And based off of that alone, that gives them more clout over LSU to be like a true number one going into this. But like I said to a couple people before, don't be mad at the fact that the number one ranking isn't there. Only be mad at the fact if you don't get past Clemson again. Because it don't matter who you go up against at the end of the day. You are one of the 4 teams that has a chance to play for the national title if you make it past your first round. So just keep that in mind, and, we'll see how it all plays out.
And you know what? That's what I was, leaning towards and trying to tie into, this conversation. Everybody was looking at the quality of the wins and how everything played out. And I'm thinking to myself, if you were really paying attention and you want to go down that quality win conversation, Ohio State had the most quality wins out of all 4 teams. Michigan State, Wisconsin, Penn State, Michigan. They beat Cincinnati, who's now ranked. Miami of Ohio and Florida Atlantic, like you said, won their conference championships, and Cincinnati made it to their conference championship. So, and with that, you're just like, well, how does this tie into everything? Those are quality wins. I don't care what you think at the end of the day. Oh man, how can you count Florida Atlantic and Miami of Ohio? You know why I can count them? Because they won their championship. And a championship is a championship no matter how you swing it. So you look at LSU's, they beat Texas, Florida, Auburn, Bama, and Georgia. Texas hasn't been ranked since what? Week 6? Week 7. So that crosses them off. It drops them down from 5 to 4. And then Clemson. Come on, man. They scheduled Wofford. They put Wofford on the schedule. And their only quality win, granted, I will give, and like I said, I'm not biased to this. I just thought the body of work was more leaning towards Ohio State. But I'm not going to ever take away the fact that you've won 5 straight ACC titles. Not going to take that away. But when you schedule, or when you have on your schedule, subpar Texas A&M, who did give you a fight, and then you have a very undermanned Virginia team, it hurts. So your quality of wins drop dramatically right there, because if you're looking to, well, Dabo Swinney said it best, we feel disrespected. You should feel disrespected, and you should be penalized for disrespecting yourself by scheduling Wofford. Not even at the beginning of the season, towards the end of the season. Your tune-up games, as what we call them, or your stat games, are supposed to be at the beginning of the season, not at the end. In Oklahoma, they beat a ranked Texas at the time. They beat Baylor, who's ranked still, and then they beat Oklahoma State, and then you got the win again against Baylor, who's still ranked. So that dropped them down to 3 when you cross off Texas. Now, the common denominator with this is Oklahoma and LSU played Texas, who's no longer ranked. So do you still count that as a ranked quality win, or do you count it as you beat them at the time, Texas was hot, so we'll let you slide on that one? Because me personally, I'm looking at the rankings. It's not fair. Your quality of wins don't hold up. Granted, the quality of wins for Ohio State drops when when Michigan State turns into shit, but it's Michigan State. I don't expect them to be ranked for long if they beat Arizona State. So even with that, you still got 6 quality wins, because every team that you beat that had a top 25 ranking is still ranked or won their conference championship.
Very true. And I feel like what they did was they took the ranking that those teams were at the time that they played and used that and said, okay, well, they were ranked a lot higher at that time frame, so let's give them the points for that. But like you said, as the season went on, those teams weren't ranked as high, or they fell apart, or their opponent or whoever wasn't really winning much either. So it's almost a matter of, okay, do you still hold that against them, or do you like, okay, let's just call it what it is and let's utilize that portion of it to kind of justify what we're doing with these rankings? Or it's just weird, like seeing how they did the top 4 based off of that. I do feel like Ohio State definitely should have got the number 1 spot, but regardless, they would have still found a way to try to get Oklahoma to play them the first round. I felt if anything with them doing that, they would have moved Oklahoma up to have them play, and then that really would have fired up Dabo Swinney, or try to get them to figure out what to do differently. Because with Oklahoma, like you said, those wins that they had, the ones that Clemson had, it's almost like even with them. But because Oklahoma has that loss, they automatically will be at 4. But they got something to prove this year. I feel like Clemson is the only undefeated team that actually has to prove that they should be in the playoff.
I mean, yes, Clemson should be in the playoff. They earned it. Now, don't get me wrong, but when you look at the body of work, and if you give me a second, I'm gonna pull up Clemson's Clemson's schedule because, you know, this is a big deal, and I get it. Dabo Swinney feels like they've been disrespected all season or for the past couple of years or however long it's been. But let's look at the body of work, man. You beat Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech not been the good did this year. You beat a number 12 Texas A&M. Syracuse stinks.
And they should have beat Clemson last year.
Right. And then you went on to beat the University of Charlotte.
Right.
Really? Not only that, your next 3 games, you barely win at UNC. And, you know, after that, UNC went to hell. You dominate Florida State. You dominate Louisville. You dominate Boston College. And then you have that Wofford game sitting right there in the middle. And it's like, you want credit for beating on a team you're supposed to beat on at the beginning of the season. Then you dominate North Carolina State, Wake Forest, and South Carolina, who happen to beat Georgia. But every team that you beat went either 500 or below 500. So what respect are you looking for as far as being left out of the playoff? If you got left out of the playoff, it would be because the ACC is not where it's supposed to be. Like, Virginia is the only team who will probably get 10 wins this season in the ACC outside of Clemson. Everybody else, like I said, is either gonna be 500 or get over 500 with their bowl win. So I just don't get where I get the motivation for it, but as far as looking at your body of work, it's not working because your conference is hurting you. I'd say go independent, but you know, that's not where it's at. Because if you see, Notre Dame's still having trouble, and they've been independent for the last 100 years.
And quite frankly, they need to go ahead and just join the ACC at this point. I mean, they're already done it in basketball, and it helped them out in basketball. Football may not help as much, but it'd be enough to be like, okay, we're actually in a conference. We have some regular games scheduled, and, you know, for them to win a conference, if that ever were to happen, will give them, you know, a little more fight to be able to be in the actual playoffs. But it's just killing me, man, to see this kind of thing right now where you're like, okay, here's Clemson undefeated. They're in there number 3. And all of a sudden the coach feels like he's being disrespected. And it's like, did you expect to be in the number 1 or number 2 spot above OSU or LSU? Like, where do you find that evidence at? Like, where is that?
Yeah, and like I said, well, to touch on the Notre Dame comment, I'm just going to let you know right now, I ain't going to say it ain't going to never happen, but in this case, it ain't going to never happen. And here's why. Notre Dame and NBC will never join a conference because that'd be millions of dollars that they would have to share with the rest of that conference. And I just don't see the University of Notre Dame doing that ever. Let's call it what it is. NBC has had Notre Dame contract since before I was a kid. And I remember not only just watching Notre Dame on NBC, but they would kick off other sports just for a Notre Dame
Very
game.
true.
So I'm not seeing that happen. And you know, as much as I would like them to join the Big Ten, to be honest, but I know that that's not going to happen. So because I know that's not going to happen, I just feel that the ACC, it's if you feel disrespected while being a player or coach for Clemson, you need to look at your conference and say, what the hell are y'all doing? Man? Y'all might want to tough it up,
right?
Because y'all hurt us.
And on top of that, it's like,
You know,
you just won the dang on title. I mean, what more do you want? Right.
5 straight
You won
times.
5 straight times in the ACC. You finally got a national title. I don't understand what else you want at this point. It's like you feel the way you feel, but at the end of the day, go out there and do it, man. You know, prove that you could knock off this team next time that you play. or just put your foot in your mouth and just be quiet, man. I mean, it's just crazy to me how he's even making statements like that. You know what I mean? It's like you gotta look at your own conference you've been in. You gotta look at the different teams that you played and how you played them. And like you said, Wolford is on the schedule, bro. That just doesn't help you at all.
And like I said, I know that these schedules get made years in advance, but still, even with that, if you plan on winning a championship, okay, folks, we're back. Apparently, our streaming service thought we talked too much today, so we're just going to cut it short and end it here. One last game. Army-Navy game is this weekend. Army and Navy have gone back and forth for the 120 years. So, Ronnie, where do you see this one going?
Oh, man. Well, I see this going toward the Army's side on this one. It's going to be interesting just to see the kind of dynamic they bring to the field, their offense, and also how they just handle that atmosphere. It's always one of those games where it's going to be action-packed. You know, it's going to be passionate because even though we thank them for their service and what they do for our country, it's just something that they like to have every year to where it's going to be a banger. Regardless of the records, you know, it's always going to be a good game. But Army just seems a little more poised coming into this. And then also, I hate to say it, but they got a little flash on them too, man. I know you sent me them jerseys.
Man, them uniforms was nice.
It's looking really, really nice. You know what I mean? So I think they're coming prepared to not only show up, but show out, man. So I'm going to go with the Army on this one, man.
Yeah, I agree. The Army always gives a fight. They've been passing the ball more often in the last couple of weeks. So we'll see how the passing game works against Navy's defense. But I'm looking for Navy to not lose this one by a lot, but I think Navy keeps it close. But Army's momentum and the defense shows up and, you know, gives Navy that L for the second straight year.
Absolutely.
All right, folks. Well, before we get cut off again, we'd like to thank everybody for tuning in this weekend. And, you know, if you like what you hear, we are working on a Twitter and a Facebook page. So be on the lookout for that in the upcoming week or so. And we love and appreciate everybody listening. Thank y'all again. Smooth. Hopefully next weekend's better.
Hey, man, you know, it happens. It definitely happens, but I'm just blessed to be able to have this opportunity. I know with two guys that just have a different opinion when it comes to football, it just feels pretty good to speak to somebody who's like-minded and also has stats to back it up. It's not just fandom. So I definitely appreciate that, and I thank you all for listening in, and be sure to stay tuned to next week as well once we come back with more updates for not only the NFL, but also college football as well. So,
all right, everybody, take it easy. Have a good night. Be blessed. Catch y'all next week.